Hello, and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today, it's going to be taken up a notch. So, the last few podcasts have been teetottering around behaviors, mindsets, maintenance, and all things that keep results. But today, I have Aaron Scafie. I think I said that correct.
Close, Scarfy, that'll do.
Aaron Scafie, and he kind of makes women even more elite, let's just say. He knows the ins and outs of body recomposition, and body recomposition in simple terms is you want to build muscle, you want to lose fat, and you want to get this toned body, this lean physique. And the way we go about it isn't really optimal. We do too many sets, we do too many reps. We think that high reps is the way to look toned. We think that not eating enough is the way to look toned. And we're also going to touch a little bit on hormones when it comes to females being different from men, because should we really train differently than men? Should we approach nutrition differently than men? And why is building muscle so important? And then we're going to talk a little bit about gut health and this whole detox and what it really, really means at the base level. So with that, I will let you take it away and let's get your view on, should we really train differently and should we really approach nutrition differently?
Thanks for the intro. Name's Aaron from Elite Strength here in Vic. Apologies to those listening. I do have a bit of a chest infection. No, I don't have the deathly virus, but it's just if I sound a little bit nasally or if I'm a little bit slower than usual, it's just because chest infection's getting me a little bit, but I've had my coffee or my brain juice, so hopefully we can get some good content out on this. Thanks to you, Ruby, for having me on first and foremost. So talking about, I guess, training in general, right? I mean, whether you're male or female, I guess the question is, are you training hard enough? It doesn't matter on your sex. The first and foremost is always training hard. So if you're wanting to achieve some form of hypertrophy or recomposition or some form of goal to do with resistance-based training, it usually comes down to training with some form of effort, and the effort needs to meet the goal required, right? So if you're trying to pursue hypertrophy, bigger muscles, more muscle, we know that the primary driver of skeletal tissue is tension. So tension being weight or weight on a bar effectively. Now, obviously there's quite a few caveats that go to that, but the primary source of building muscle, take away the nutrition side of things and recovery side of things, is more weight on a bar for more reps. That's really that simple, and that doesn't make it doesn't differentiate between you being male or female. The bar doesn't care what sex you are.
This is something that you guys need to replay and write it down, because the bar does not care whether you're male or female. And that's the whole point that I wanted Aaron to get out, is because people think that just because you're female, you should be lifting differently to men, or because you're in a fat loss phase, you should be lifting differently. Well, it only changes because of recovery, but it's still the same principle. The focus is always you're training to build muscle. Now, Aaron trains a lot of strength athletes, elite strength. And in training a lot of strength athletes, coming from a background of strength myself, and a lot of people even looking at me and saying, I wish I had your legs. Well, it's like, these legs have spent time under weights that are over double my body weight, almost triple my body weight. And that didn't make me look like a man. That didn't make me bulky. That didn't get me fatter. Like, maybe you can touch on the importance of just how much building muscle changes our physique and the importance behind muscle itself.
Yeah, so the bulky argument's always an interesting one. I used to encounter it a lot back when I first started coaching with females, and it was like, oh, why are you here? Like, what do you want from my coaching? And it's like, I just want to get toned. I don't want to look bulky. And it's kind of like, okay, cool. Define bulky. Like, what is bulky to you? I think that's everyone's perception of certain things is always interesting. So asking, past female clientele and even current female clientele that say the same thing. It's kind of like, hey, like what's bulky mean to you? And it's kind of like, well, it's always referenced to men. It's kind of like, oh, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example. It's like, cool. That's a really good example. Now, did you know that Arnold Schwarzenegger was on a ton of steroids? Like, are you on a ton of steroids? No. Good chance you're not going to get that bulky. Like, it's one of those things, right? And it's like most people, both male and female, just seem to have this weird perception of what goes into being like that big, because that's always usually the marker of bulky, right? Like a bodybuilder, whether it be, you know, an athlete, a fitness athlete on a TV commercial who, you know, we know is mostly on some form of enhancement because that's the game, or, you know, a professional bodybuilder where they see it on a post or on an Instagram ad or something like that. And even with a lot of the females, they use like a lot of females for advertisements and stuff like that. And you look at them and they're completely shredded, and it's just like, yeah, like you want a body like this, do this. And it's kind of like, you're not talking about all the enhancement practices that you are going through as well, because it's a big thing, especially on Instagram. Like it's huge. There are so many females using some form of enhancement. Now, again, we can dive into the topic of enhancement, but enhancement doesn't necessarily just mean anabolics. There's so many other versions and ways to enhance a physique, right? Especially in the female cohort. So don't think as a female that you being bulky or you have the potential to get bulky, because what generates that kind of bulk is testosterone, and you do not produce anywhere near enough testosterone to get bulky, but what you would deem bulky, if that makes sense.
It's the most important thing to try and separate with what you see on social media as well, because like I didn't even know that there were different forms of enhancement. It's like there is so much out there that we don't know, and if we're looking to these ladies and we want to look like them, or we don't want to look like them, what actually is going into that? And aside from that in itself, I know I can speak for myself as a female. When I looked at other ladies' physiques and I saw like this really toned look, this amazing body that I want, like one of your clients, for example, there's like these people with amazing shape, amazing bodies. They look feminine, they have a lot of muscle, but they don't look fat. And it's like, yes, I want to walk around in that body. But the thing is, that body has a lot more muscle mass than you do right now. And that might be really hard for you to comprehend. And it doesn't come from dieting your way there. So how exactly should we approach getting this body composition of our dream? Realizing, as in actually the question I want to pose in here as well is, should we do fat loss phases differently? Do our hormones mean that we need to do fat loss phases differently, have breaks differently?
So, okay, so for the first part of that question, you will never, and not when I say you, I don't mean you personally, I mean you, the listener, will never look like someone else. You are you. And that's the biggest thing. And it's probably the hardest thing to accept, right? You can look the best that you can with the practices a coach puts in place for you, and provided the coach obviously knows what they're doing, you will look the best that you can look in the time frame that's, you know, designated to you. Really, it's so inter-individual. It's just stressing that point more than anything is probably the biggest thing from my end, especially with mostly female clientele. That's what we look at. It's like, hey, like you want to look like this person, but hold on, this person's 6'4" and you're 3'1". Like, in what world? In comparison, your legs, for example, are probably going to be bigger than mine. I'm 6'1". You're like what, 5'4"? Like I have no chance. I have so much more muscle on my bone to grow and make it look like a certain size. It just takes time, right? It just takes time and reps. Whereas that's why when we look at the bodybuilding world, or especially in the male side of things, but even females, but male bodybuilders, the best of the best, bar Rami, 5 foot. They're under 6 foot. They might look really tall on stage. They're all under 6 foot. They're like 5'6", 5'7", 5'8". So, you know, it's very rare that you get a bodybuilder that comes across who's over 6 foot and is going to place on stage. It's very rare. That just comes down to genetics. So you can't help your genetics. Blame your parents because it's their fault, and blame their parents because it's their fault too. So, you know, you'll look the best that you can look with what you got. And that's as simple as that. And, you know, you need to find a way to, I guess, accept that and be okay with that. Now, When it comes to hormonal side of things, well, yeah, I mean, we're very different, right? Like males' dominant hormone, well, for a period of time anyway, for most of the time, is testosterone. It's what builds muscle. That's what gives us what we have, our androgenic effects. So androgenic effects being like our facial hair, deep voice, body hair, that sort of stuff, ability to build muscle and all that sort of stuff. And that's why when we take like anabolic steroids, that's what happens for males. On the flip side, when females, their dominant hormone is estrogen. Well, I guess it's a mix of estrogen, progesterone, but we just say estrogen just for argument's sake. That's not to say that estrogen isn't good. That's not to say that estrogen doesn't build muscle. It does. When there's estrogen present, it does mean that there's some form of testosterone present as well. And then you have to look through like the menstrual cycle and see when, certain periods of time have higher escalations of estrogen versus progesterone and all that sort of stuff. But totally different conversation, right? Estrogen is effectively the muscle builder for females. But again, estrogen's present because there is some testosterone present, if that makes sense. Whereas males, we have more testosterone and less estrogen, right? Again, estrogen is really important in both sides because it's a liver protective, brain protective, kidney protective, or we'll just say organ protective. It also is ergogenic, so it can help you lose body fat, provided it's in balance. If you have a estrogen dominance, then it's a problem. And then, and it's the same thing in males. So it's like when guys, get bigger and that sort of stuff, and then when they start using exogenous hormones, we want to keep estrogen at balance with testosterone because one's attacking, one's defending, if that makes sense.
I guess this is a really important time to talk about the effects that dieting and overdoing any, whether it's going up or going down, but we want to talk about the dieting because that's what women seem to do the most.
Yep.
Pushing that too far increases your cortisol. Now, cortisol is not good nor bad, but you keep pushing it down, this impacts your sex hormones because now your progesterone's going to go down. Now someone's going to say your estrogen's too high.
Well, then your ratio of estrogen to progesterone moves out of whack and then you become estrogen dominant. So energy deficits is what we call dieting, right? Energy, and like we've all heard energy in, energy out, blah blah blah. While people are like, that's not the end all and be all, it kind of is because it's the overarching principle of what's happening. So energy in is food, energy out is your expenditure. So basically your activity during the day. If you limit your energy input for a longer period of time, we start to develop these chronic maladaptations that we don't want. And like you just said, as soon as cortisol rises, cortisol will affect male and females similar yet different. So in a very similar fashion, yet a little bit differently, purely because we as males don't necessarily have these estrogen progesterone levels that get affected by cortisol. Whereas with females, they seem to be affected by a higher cortisol. When we say high cortisol, it's high cortisol for a period of time. It's not acute. So it's like if you wake up one morning with high cortisol, you're going to be okay. It could be you just had a bad sleep, you had something really weird to eat the night before. It could be you just didn't eat the night before and you're waking up stressed, because cortisol is that stress, what we call that stress hormone. But when we say stress, we don't mean it could mean any form of stress. It's just your body recognizes most types of stress simply as stress, right? Just for keeping it as simple as possible. So, in the mornings you wake up, cortisol is what wakes you up. So it's kind of like you need cortisol to live. Otherwise, you just don't wake up. But with that in mind, if it's chronically high, you will have downstream effects on progesterone, estrogen, and then you'll have problems with your menstrual cycle, irregularity of the menstrual cycle, and then you'll have problems, and they just keep going. They just keep cascading through.
Bring in the thyroid with that as well, because women don't realize that your sex hormones don't just impact the ability for you to have a baby, but it really, really can play a toll on your metabolism because of
yeah, definitely. So anything that starts to affect like one hormone or two hormones, it's usually you're going to find they all work in cycle. So effectively downstream, your thyroid will be affected. It's not necessarily whether it slows down or speeds up. It's not sort of how it works. It's whether it produces T3, T4 at a subsequent rate or at a decent rate for you then to use or to utilize. So it gets a little tricky when it comes to thyroid, only because Most of it's controlled by the hypothalamus. So your entire menstrual cycle is regulated by hypothalamus. But then we have these external factors that can happen, like things
in the brain.
like
Just in
yeah, yeah. So the things like cortisol and stuff that come in basically from like an outside factor. So it's like you have this downstream effect of hypothalamus into producing FSH and LH, and then again downstream into estrogen, or it's pregnenolone, and then through that sort of mechanism into estrogen, into the menstrual cycle. And then you have things on the outside that can come in and cave it and just be like, okay, well, now we have cortisol, it's giving problems. Where does that start affecting the wheel effectively?
So one thing I want to just remind people is that we need to not look at biomarkers as in like cortisol too high or whatever it is that we try to rivet ourselves on. Don't look at them in isolation, it's trends. But how can mentally dieting, like this binge restrict cycle, this let's just eat so little and then overeat for a few days, how can this still lead to the same maladaptations that have people still having a lot of fat, hardly really eating all that much most of the time, trying to do too much, yet stuck?
Yeah, so I mean, it depends. There's two ways we can look at this. We can look at it from like the mental health aspect, which is definitely not my field. I'm not a psych, so there's usually some sort of mental health, not issue, but something at play that's probably making someone feel a certain way. The other thing that we can look at from a physiological standpoint is leptin and ghrelin and what they're doing there. So that's a whole different ball game. So that's not even really attached to a lot of this stuff. It does sort of insert and like divert in, but it's its own problem as well. So when you're chronically dieting, leptin and ghrelin basically get thrown out the window. Your body's telling you you're not hungry, and then as soon as you start eating, your body's telling you you're starving, and then you're feeding it enough food, and then you're just starving even more, yet you're not starving because you've got enough energy coming in. But because the body hasn't had enough energy for a period of time, the body's like, shit, I need to store all this food, keep giving me food so I can store it, because prehistorically we're not meant to diet down. Our body's not designed to starve itself and die, which is effectively what we're doing when we diet down.
So what he's trying to say is you need to keep your body feeling safe. Like there is a lag effect with everything in the body. And yeah, okay, it is calories in, calories out, energy in, energy out, but your hormones, your health status, all this stuff impacts how your body uses the calories. Like exactly it's still energy in, energy out, but there is a lot of shit that happens in the interim. It's like you put something into a cylinder and then it comes out. You don't really see what's
going on. Yep.
Like you just can't see it. You can, and I feel like women, they might feel it, but then they swipe it off and then they just keep plugging through. And it's like you have the markers there, but you're ignoring them, which is just combusting into this big explosion. And I guess one thing you can link to the physiology with the binge restrict thing as well is your metabolism adapts to the lower calories, even though you're still feeding it higher. So
your body will always look for what we call homeostasis. Your body's an amazing machine when it comes to this way. Your body's got, it's funny, the best analogy I've ever heard of the human body is it's got two primary functions depending on if you're male and female. If you're male and female, it's to live. That's it. It doesn't want to die. It wants to stay alive. That's it. And if you're female, to reproduce. That's it, because males can't reproduce, right? So your body will do everything that it can to stay alive. So once you start doing things that effectively attack it and kill it, like dieting, which is restricting the energy that the body needs to function in an optimal manner, your body is going to do what it needs to do to then live and stay alive. So what happens is things like, because we have less energy in, your body will preserve that energy. And that's where that metabolism downregulation or upregulation, depending on how you want to look at it, happens or occurs. So what happens is your metabolism starts doing its thing and saying, okay, if this is the new norm, then we're going to cut some shit out. So it's like, okay, we're not going to bounce my knee. I'm not going to want to get up and go for a walk up the stairs. I'm going to take the elevator or the lift. I'm not going to do these certain little things that require energy, right? Because it's like, well, I don't know when my next energy hit's going to come. So I'm going to grab it and I'm going to store it. And that's when leptin and ghrelin start playing their little game. So, and then what happens is we have this turnover time or this turnover rate of when leptin and ghrelin start to actually function a bit more normally again. In that lag time between dieting down and then moving back to maintenance, your brain is still, well, your stomach and your brain are both saying, hey, I'm still kind of hungry here. I need the food. And it's not, you're not actually hungry. Your food, your stomach and your brain are both saying, we need to store energy, because if you do this to us again, we want to have that energy for a bad time. And that energy, unfortunately, most of the time ends up being fat. So when that occurs, like, well, your body's going to sit there and be like, okay, cool, I'm going to chill out here. I've got enough fat to last me 12 months. Do what you want to me. I'm good. But then if you're super, super lean, when you don't have any fat stores, your body's going to be like, bruh, I need fat. Like, send it my way. And then as soon as you start eating, your body's like, nah, I still need more fat. And then I need more fat. And then the switch just doesn't get turned off, or it takes too long to get turned off. And then that's when we start having those problems of that binge that binge eating type scenario. And it's, you succumb to your hormones.
That's so true. Like, you are a slave to your hormones. You can't override that. You need to work with your body. And I guess this is why, in a way, it's so important that if you don't have the knowledge, or you don't have the energy and time to prioritize going deep into this shit, is really important to actually get someone to help you through it, because that's where everything blows off the seal. Like, intuitive eating doesn't exist until you actually have education around the food. If you actually want to look a certain way, like, you need to know how to live at maintenance first before you can actually become more flexible and intuitive with their eating. But I want to circle that around to the question now that everyone understands it, is how should we now, knowing all that, approach getting this dream physique differently when we have to lose fat and get that muscle?
The biggest thing, and the funny, it's probably the thing that's changed the most about myself as a coach, is actually, one, making sure that you're in a position to, let's say your goal is to diet down, for example, making sure you're in a health position to diet down first and foremost. And when we say health, we don't mean just physically. Obviously physically plays a big part, but mentally as well. Like, you need to be willing to accept periods of hunger, and that you're doing this for an aesthetic outcome. So it's like, well, hold on, your brain is going to be like, yeah, I'm really hungry right now. And it's like, you need to be telling yourself, yeah, like, no shit, like, I'm meant to be hungry. And on the flip side to that, if you're not hungry, you're probably not in a deficit, which is something that I like to really reiterate. There's no way around being in a deficit. You will always be hungry. And it's just,
again, people think it's an emergency.
Yeah. A lot of people, I remember there was, I don't know, it's not so much now. There was a phase probably a couple of years ago saying, oh, we can manage your deficit by, eating these foods, and you're not going to feel hungry, and you're going to be satiated for longer, and blah, 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 blah. And then when you looked at the client's results, they look the exact same. And you're like, okay, well, clearly, because they're at maintenance, because they're not hungry, like, no shit. So you need to be hungry to be in a deficit. That's just a normal byproduct. It's a physiological process that you can't change. I mean, if you can, let me know, because that'd be sick, but you can't. So, you need to be hungry for a period of time, and you need to be okay with being hungry. I think that's the biggest thing. So from a physiological standpoint, we need to make sure we're healthy enough to diet down. But then also from a mental health standpoint, we need to make sure that we're okay to be hungry for periods of time and accepting of that.
I actually really wanted to emphasize that, because you might not see it in your end, but I see it a lot. People think that they can just bypass it all, because this is why, I'm sure you saw it as well, this is why I put up my post the other day saying, this is how you lose weight. Number 2, calorie deficit. Number 1 was be in a place to get into a calorie deficit, because a lot of people do treat hunger as an emergency, or they can't sit with that hunger. They think that there's something wrong with them, because that message is still getting put out there. So number 1, get yourself in a place to allow it mentally and physically. From there, where do we go?
Yeah, well, I mean, once we've done and established that you're physically and mentally ready to diet down, it's literally adherence to the plan and trusting your coach, and hopefully your coach has a clue. Like, if Ruby's your coach, listen to your coach. She knows her shit. So, that's the point, is now that we have this plan in place, it's following the plan and trying not to deviate it as often as possible, right? Depending on the strategy used for dieting down, it's like, well, if we're going to do a slower burn, for example, where we're just going to pull calories away very slowly over a longer period of time, which is, one way to diet down, then you need to trust that, because week 1 to week 2, you may not have lost any weight or any body fat, doesn't mean that from week 2 to week 3 or week 3 to week 4, you're not going to accommodate that and lose maybe 2 kilos. And you're like, oh shit, I didn't lose anything for the first 2 weeks. In the last 2 weeks, I lost a kilo each week, 500 grams on average per week, 2 kilos for the month. It's like, that's pretty damn good, if that makes sense. So it's like trusting the process of the coach is probably the next phase. Once we're healthy and ready to go mentally, provided the coaches obviously run through the plan, which I would just assume that the coach has, but maybe that's my mistake.
Yeah, that's like, you need to trust it and realize it is going to take time, and knowing that it isn't a forever phase, because I think a lot of people approach it like, oh my God, I'm going to have to live like this. I can't make all these sacrifices. And it's just like, that's why you need to pre-qualify for the deficit, and then realize this is just a phase. You're not going to be like in a fat loss phase for ages, especially if you are going to go the moderate route where you want to get it done in like 8-10 weeks, even though most people think that it should go longer. Like, when do we know how long we should drive that for before coming back out of it?
Yeah, there's heaps of telltale signs. Now, it really depends on the coach. For example, like you just use sort of the 8 to 10 week mark, and then a lot of people thinking that that's a short period of time. For me, that's a long period of time. So my clients will tell you that I go short and hard. Like, we're in fat loss phases for 4 to 6 weeks, and that's it. But it's extreme. But I work with a certain clientele that can do that. Like, I work with an aesthetic based goal client that basically wants to get on stage or needs to drop weight pretty quick usually. And again, there's a lot more work that goes into obviously the pre-qualifying of this, because it takes a toll, right? But at the same time, we've had clients that have done almost 12 months of dieting. Not to say that they dieted every single day for 12 months, that we've had weeks of maintenance, months of maintenance and refeeding and all that sort of stuff. So then we start to look at what are the negative effects of dieting and when to pull things out. So it depends on what you're measuring. So you can measure things like blood pressure, blood glucose levels. You can measure sleep quality, sleep time. You can measure actual, like photos is probably a big one. You can look at what's happening on the physique itself. And then once we start to accumulate diet fatigue, these things will show. And again, everybody's different. And that's why the more data we can take as coaches, the better of a picture we have when things start to go, I guess, not wrong, but they start to trend in the wrong way. And it's kind of like we can get ahead of that. And we can be a bit more responsive on that end. Instead of being a bit more proactive, we can be a bit more reactive, right? So it's like, go on.
I was gonna say, something to also bring into that is diet fatigue isn't just physical, it's mental. Like,
Oh, 100%.
Decision fatigue, just
Yeah.
people not actually putting in the same effort they did in the first 4 weeks, and then it starts to wane, and then they wonder why progress stalled, or they're looking worse for a period of time. So
yeah, and we can use things like refeeds and free meals and that sort of stuff to help manage fatigue and that sort of stuff. But it really depends on the length of time acquired or required for the goal. So, and it's kind of why I like to do things short and sharp. Kind of, I don't need to really use refeeds. I don't really need to use free meals. It's kind of like, okay, 4 weeks, you can give me 30 days of just, tough work, and then we can reassess, you know what I mean? And it's always having the client involved as well in the process. But if we have a longer, let's say 12 to 16 week diet, we can then go, okay, at every 4th week, we might take a 2-day refeed. And it kind of gives the client like, okay, I've got, 25 days I need to do this. Like, cool, I can do this for 25 days. It's like day 1, tick, day 2, tick, they get to 25. Yes, carbs, or whatever it is that you're doing for the refeed. Macca's, whatever makes you happy, and then we get past that 3 days. It's like, I feel good, that fatigue is washed off. Let's go back and let's do this again. So it's like the client then understands in that 3-day refeed, you're probably going to put on a little bit of weight. It's literally just intramuscular glycogen and triglycerides with a little bit of water that comes with the extra carbs. You might look a tad watery depending on if you've got the balance right with the amount for the refeed. And then it's like, okay, cool. Back into it. And then look, that washed off in the first 3 days and we're already down an extra kilo. Like, shit. Magic, science.
you also have to keep in mind that you can't copy someone else's protocol. You can't just like,
Not at all.
Oh, this person's doing a 3-day refeed, maybe I can do that. Yeah, but at the same time, I know that I can't do that shit, because as soon as I start, I can't stop. And a lot of people have that mentality where, okay, now I had this, I'm just getting, and then you start to keep falling off plan day after day, week after week, because you've lost that consistency. So you need to figure out what it is you want from the start and stop. Like, when you take the longer approach and do periods of fat loss in between, that is the best way to be consistent with it. Because you can touch on this, because most of like, you want to look like an athlete. This is exactly what Aaron does. Like, Aaron trains and coaches people of that sort. I am one myself. And a lot of people would say goals to my body, would say goals to someone else who's like me. But we treat ourselves in that way. We don't spend forever dieting, and we have to spend times getting uncomfortable, getting bigger, so to speak, to be able to see those results pan out. But why is it important to spend more time building the body versus,
put it this way, it's much easier to lose fat than put on muscle. The process of putting on muscle is more energy taxing than it is to lose body fat. That's just from physiology. That's simple physiology. So putting on tissue takes longer. That's why we're in surplus phases usually for a longer period of time if the goal is to put on muscle, which when people say, both male and female say, oh, I want to look like this person, and then like you said, they're usually a more muscular version of what it is that you want. Well, yeah, we need to be in at least a maintenance phase to give you half a chance of growing, and then into a very slight surplus, which then leads to, potential body fat gain. Depending on the severity of the surplus will depend on how much body fat you put on and how adherent you are to the protocol that your coach has put in place. Would also depend on how much body fat you put on. And then we can look at doing this dieting stuff down, but you're not going to spend, 12 months in a deficit. So again, when we look at the overarching principle of energy out, energy in, if you basically decrease energy in for, let's say, forever, like what's going to happen? You die. You don't have enough energy coming in. How are you meant to live, right? There's just a point of time where your body's like, oh, I'm not getting enough energy, I'm done, bye, and just sort of takes off, right? So we need to have this balance of maintenance, growth phases, and deficits, and then understanding which one to apply when. We want to build tissue and look a certain way, and whatever that is, then maintenance to surplus to build tissue. And then once we have acquired either the tissue that we want, the body weight that we want, or we've accumulated too much body fat, which is also unhealthy for us, we can then move into that deficit and start to mitigate that by dropping body fat to a level where, yourself or the coach is happy to then move back to a maintenance phase and then either go back to a surplus phase or back into a deficit, depending.
So I guess a great way to sum that up, because I really want to touch on going back to that hormonal stuff, is realize this person, even though you know that you will never look like someone else, but the type of body that you want is a more muscular version of you. And the thing is, muscle does have weight, and in Aaron's words, it is energy taxing, more energy taxing to put on muscle. But what's that second word? It's more energy taxing. That means it needs more food, but muscle also burns more calories. Albeit it's not that big of a difference, but the thing is, if you're active throughout the day, you are carrying more muscle around. The muscle needs to maintain itself, and you're able to move more weights, more load in the gym, which in itself is a massive stimulus on creating that body that you want. But feeding back into the hormonal cascade of dieting, and I guess on the other side, having too much body fat, like they are both inherently unhealthy, and bringing in detox. If our liver and our gut health are very, very poor of health, then we're not going to be able to extract nutrients from food. And fat is a toxic, it's a toxin site. That's where all the toxins are stored. So realizing that on either side of the equation, it's all about our lifestyle and our nutrition that brings us to an equilibrium. How would you say we tackle it if someone's been over dieting? Even if they're over fat, but if they're over dieting in that stage where they're chronically maladapted.
That's an easy one. So when we get a new client and they've been, I've been dieting for 12 months, and you're kind of like, have you though? So we'd be going straight to a maintenance phase, and it's just like, I'm going to put you at maintenance. I'm going to put you at maintenance for 6 months. Sorry. At the end of the day, our job as coaches is to look after the client's health. It may not be what the client wants, and that's okay. If the client then wants to go elsewhere to get what they want, they're just going to have to, go full circle and come back and realize, oh, this coach actually was looking after me. Who would have thought? Happens all the time, right? So getting a client that's chronically dieted down, but doesn't look like they've chronically dieted down, or not in a real position to have dieted down. It's a simple conversation, and the conversation usually is, hey, we have some potential issues going on here. We need to look at a few things. While we do that, I'm going to put you at maintenance, you know, and you're probably going to get a recomp effect anyway, depending on the training style, which is where I sort of specialize. Putting a new client at maintenance and giving them a different training stimulus, which is what sort of develops that recomp effect for the first 6 to 8 weeks anyway. So, and then, you know what, they're really, really happy because in 2 months' time, they've leaned out, put on tissue, but the scale weight hasn't moved. And it's like, yeah, because you've dropped some body fat, you've added some muscle, like, here you go, right? And we're just going to continue this process for 6 months. We're going to keep you healthy. Oh, look, 6 months has turned around. You're now in a position to grow, deficit, whatever it is that we want to do. But yeah, that initial client interaction with somebody that's been maladapted for a while, it's like, hey, okay, we need you at maintenance for 6 months at least, because we need all these functions to basically recorrect themselves, because the body will do that. That's what the body does as a machine. It is so efficient that it will look after you, because what did we say at the start? Your body wants to live and live well. So it'll recorrect itself most of the time. It may need a little support here and there. You may need to, you know, use a supplement here, a supplement there to, you know, stimulate this or decrease that. But most of the time, just it's a matter of time and energy requirements. So make sure you get the energy in that's required for the body to help repair itself effectively.
Everything you just said there, it's so perfect. It, like, 6 months, why 6 months? Why not 4 months? Like, that's the thing that a lot of people need to realize. So why is it so important that we actually push this through for maintenance? Like, yeah, okay, you still have body fat to lose, but why is it so important physiologically and mentally as well to actually stay in this phase?
To get you just to chill out, because your body's so hyper stressed internally and mentally. You're probably going to be fried from doing all this stuff. The way I look at it is, I'm just thinking of a new clients that I've had that come on board that are in a similar position, where new clients come on board, they're so stressed because they've been dieting for so long and they're not getting the result. And that in itself is causing them to retain more, because cortisol goes through the roof. And it's like everything that we were speaking about before. And it's kind of like, okay, we need you to just basically relax from a two-pronged approach. We need you to mentally chill the fuck out. Sorry, swearing, but we then need you also, we need you then to also chill out from a physiological standpoint. We need all these little internal stresses to just really relax and calm down. Once these things calm down, it's like everyone uses the hype word inflammation. Like, okay, cool, let's use inflammation as a thing. Like, we want all this inflammation on the inside to chill. And how do we do that? It's purely time. It's kind of like you roll an ankle, what happens? You put some ice on it or whatever it is, and you give it time to heal. It's the same thing. That doesn't change. You give the body time to heal, and that's what we're doing. Letting our hormones and everything that everything that's going on the inside basically recorrect itself, because that's what it does. You can't really do much in that aspect unless you start looking at exogenous use of things, which I do not encourage.
That, like, if you guys want to read it, I do actually have an article up on my site about inflammation, but who would have thought that chronic stress is one of the massive triggers for this? Like,
Yeah.
A lot of people do not realize that when you are coming to a coach and even though you have body fat, but you've been trying to diet for so long, this is that mentally dieting thing that I was talking about. You're never going to be in a position to commit to what you need to commit to get effective results, and your body internally isn't going to respond the way it needs to, because a healthy body is a responsive body. And like, how important is it for our gut health? Like, our gut health is such a woo-woo topic, but it literally means your body's ability to digest food, to take out what it needs from food. How important is that when it comes to body composition, and how much does all this shit impact?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess that's the first primary contact your body has with energy in being food, right? So it's like, as soon as food comes in, what the first thing that goes through is your digestive tract. So going through the digestive system, if that's not in a more optimal fashion or functioning as a more optimal unit, then you already put yourself, at a back pedal. Like, you're already starting behind the line, like you're in trouble. Like, and this is not good. We want to be able to get your digestion at a point where, okay, that's the thing that we don't worry about what's happening next, if that makes sense. And digestion's an interesting one. Gut health, like you said, is a very, very very broad topic that we have not much science on, to be honest. And that comes from even the gut specialists, PhDs in gut microbiome and stuff like that. They're all like, yeah, we know something about something, but we don't know much about this. It's kind of like, cool, you said that, and we're just going to keep it there. We do know that there is an axis between the gut and the brain. We don't know too much about its interaction just yet. We know that there's, one can be affected by the other, kind of. We don't know how, but what we do know is digestion plays a huge role in fat loss. So if you're not digesting in an optimal fashion, you put yourself behind the ball when it comes to potentially trying to diet down, or even also on the flip side, increase energy. So it's like, if we're taking too much food in, and that's one of the biggest things, and I don't know if your listeners have ever done like an actual bulk. I'm sure you have, where you have to force feed yourself. It's not fun. And it's just kind of like force feeding yourself food because your goal is to get bigger. Also puts strain on the digestive system. Right. And that's this is why I always say the energy in, energy out paradigm is always going to be the overarching goal, because it all leads down to that. So energy in allows you to function optimally. But at the same time, if you're not getting that much energy in, you're going to put stress on the digestive system on the other side of things. So it's like you're putting stress on the digestive system if you're in a surplus or if you're in a diet phase. Maintenance is maintenance. It's like gold standard. And either side of that is bad.
And you can still progress in maintenance. That's the biggest thing.
Exactly right.
One last thing before we go into the whole PMS and that kind of stuff is, Aaron mentioned training for this. Now, there is a balance between having a fine approach to the training and beast mode, but there's also the least mode. Like you need to rest and recover to be able to adapt from that stimulus, because there are different training methods. Like there's different ways to elicit different responses depending on what you are willing to do and the intensity that you are able to put into it. But none of that matters if you're not least moding. So maybe you can just.
Yeah, I mean, I'll touch a bit on training, because training, I'd be talking here for 5 hours. But when it comes to training, it's pretty straightforward. You need to be able to create a stimulus that basically forces adaptation that you can recover from. So they all intertwine with each other. If you're not creating a stimulus that you adapt from, well, then you're wasting your time in the gym. If you're creating a stimulus that you can adapt from, but you're not recovering, which is where the adaptation occurs, then you're wasting your time in the gym. It's kind of like, if you're just not training, you're not training. So then, I mean, you're not wasting anyone's time. You're just doing you basically. So we need to look at an adaptation that you can recover from effectively. How you go about that, there is many, many different ways to train. Like I said, I'd be here for 5 hours talking about training. So
yeah,
that's the basics.
That was pretty much what I did want to hear you say.
Cool.
It's like everyone's training is specific to them and specific to their protocol. And depending on where you are in your training age, your training is different as well. But I really want to go into the whole. See, I never really talk about the menstrual cycle online much, because it's like I can't say something and apply it to everybody, because everybody responds differently. Some people are on birth control, some people aren't on birth control, some people have PCOS, some people don't. So I'm going to let Aaron take it away and talk a little bit about PMS first, because that's something everybody experiences to some degree.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. It's always an interesting one talking about the menstrual cycle being a male. It's kind of like, I can't say that I experience what you experience. I mean, I apologize, but I can try and go through with all the clients and data that I've sort of accumulated over the years. When it comes to training and the menstrual cycle, now, there are those that believe that during certain periods of your menstrual cycle, or certain times of your menstrual cycle, I should say, that you should train less, or with less effort and less intensity, and that other phases of your menstrual cycle that you can train with more effort, more intensity, right? Probably not. Like it really goes on how you as an individual feel. And like, as you just said, everyone is totally different, right? Like I've got female clients, for example, that when they get their menses, they don't realize that they have it, because they don't feel anything. They don't get cramps, they don't get any pain, there's no discomfort, there's nothing. They literally just have that bleed, and that's it. So they push and they train. then I've got on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. I've got female clients that are buckled from cramps, and it's just like they can't function for 3 days. So it's just like, don't talk to them for 3 days because they will kill you. And it's like, okay, cool. We're just going to leave you there, and we're going to let you auto-regulate your training in this particular instance. You will have a lag time in between phases. So we have, the follicular and we have the luteal phases here, and right in the middle is when we have this crossover of like estrogen, progesterone dominance, as well as testosterone climbing and dropping. So that middle of the mark, let's say at the end of week, if we're going to use a 4-week traditional cycle, which it isn't, it's usually 28 to about 35 days. But for argument's sake, let's say at the end of week 2 into week 3 is when, in theory, you should be feeling almost your best, almost your best. Probably, I'd say the back end of week 2 usually is when estrogen starts to drop, progesterone starts to climb, but testosterone seems to be at this really nice steady level. So you can really push that training. Estrogen's highest basically through your menses at the start of your phase, and then it just declines, and then progesterone takes off. And most of the time, progesterone was always associated with like weaker ligaments or potential for weaker ligaments and joints and all this sort of stuff. And it's just like, well, no. And I've seen people post on Instagram over the last couple of years. It's like female coaches that sort of endorse this practice where I didn't go for my PB this week because I was in week 4 and I was too close to my menses and I didn't want to risk injury. And it's like, you are leaving gains on the table, and then me as a coach is just like, why?
Please tell me you face palm at all those people that are just treating them. They treat themselves like princesses. Like, women, you are fucking badasses. Like you probably babied someone, not babied, birthed the baby. Like you've done hard shit. Like.
And when I compare then, and I look at a lot of, again, this was a while back when it was more of a trend. It's not so much prevalent now.
No, it is.
Oh, okay. In my audience, it's not as prevalent, luckily, but it's funny because when I again, you've seen my girls and the way that they train, and that they train like that, 24/7, 365, right? It's just like, like the same with yourself. It's like you train hard the whole time, and the only time that you don't is when you do genuinely feel off. Like, it's like, okay, you're entitled to feel off. We're human at the end of the day. It doesn't matter if you're male or a female. Like, there's going to be days when you walk in and you're like, today's not it. But I'm not going to walk in and be like, my testosterone just isn't as high today, so I'm not going to train hard. Like, that's not how this works. You know what I mean? And that's one of those funny things when it comes to menstrual cycle and training. For most people, just train. And again, if you get cramps and sore, I mean, if it's to the point where you can't train, then don't train. Like, it's okay if you miss a couple of days. It's not going to be the end of the world in the grand scheme of your program or your grand scheme of your goal. But then, there are those clients that have goals that, like, too bad. Take some Panadol, suck it up, go train.
Yeah, like, that's my view on all of this is stop freaking thinking about the fact that you have a menstrual cycle. Like, the more that you focus on it, the more you're going to get this, like, placebo is a thing. And I feel like a lot of how we feel around our menstrual cycle is placebo, or it's like we're expecting something.
Yeah.
Because, I get cramps here and there. That's about it. But I don't expect to crave chocolate. So I don't crave chocolate, or I don't try to find link and cause to all of these different things. Oh, I'm PMSing this week. I must crave chocolate. I'm craving chocolate, Ruby. It's like, if you have cramps, don't train. If it's that bad, like, that's fine. But bringing in now the food side of things, a lot of people do talk about like the different cravings and stuff like that. But one thing that I keep trying to say is manage it through eating as much eating all of your protein and as much veggies as possible first. But people should be supplementing with magnesium at least.
100%. Everyone should be on magnesium regardless. Like, it's a definitely a supplement that's not used enough, and people aren't taking in that enough, to be honest. But when we look at nutrition for menstrual cycle, it's always a funny one too, right? Because we have the follicular phase, which is basically, weeks one and two. I hate using the 28-day model just because it's so inaccurate, but for argument's sake, let's use the 28-day model. The first 2 weeks, you have your menses in week 1, for example. Estrogen's pretty high, progesterone's pretty low, testosterone's cruisy. Great time to train and really push. The only limiting factor is cramps and, the way you feel. Okay, well, we can't control that. We then get to the back end, week 3 and let's say week 4 for a 28-day cycle. You have the luteal phase, which has a balance of testosterone still starting to drop down, progesterone starts to climb, and estrogen drops. Now, what happens is as progesterone climbs, you have this associated cravings. The reason why you have the associated cravings is because your actual, let's say, your metabolism actually picks up at this point in time. Your body temperature is irregulated effectively. Your body temperature increases. It's ever so slight, but it's enough to drive cravings. And what's the body telling you at this point in time? It requires more energy. It's requiring more energy to try and cool you down because your body temperature is up.
I want to re-emphasize what you just said there, because you literally nailed it on the head. We are getting a substantial increase in the demand for energy, but the thing is, the actual demand for energy from the body itself is much smaller in demand. It's like 100 calories from the last study that I read.
Yeah, I always just ballpark it because I've read studies where it's 300, I've read where it's 50. I'm like 1 to 3, say that. You cover both bases, right? So somewhere in there, you're getting this, extra requirement. Now, if you're in a deficit, you're lucky in that you have an automatic feature that puts your metabolism up a couple of 100 calories a day. Shit, take advantage of it. Don't feed into it. Do the opposite, especially if you're in the deficit. You now have like this extra little kick where you don't need to take anything exogenous and you can burn a little bit more energy for literally just a little bit more of a craving, which that you're going to have because you've accepted the fact that you're going to be hungry. So it's kind of like, hold on.
Oh, you just sparked a thought in my head. The thing is, also in that period of time, if you're now cramped up and wanting to move less or perform less, you've just offset that whole deficit to start with.
Pretty much. So it's literally that's how physiology works. And it's kind of like, it's one of these things where they all work together, both the mental and physical aspect. And now using the deficit as the example, like I was saying, you've created a deficit for a reason. You want an aesthetic goal. As a female, you have this 2-week on average period where you're going to have a higher or a more efficient metabolism for a period of time that's going to allow you to burn more energy or use more energy for nothing, purely because of a hormonal reaction. You've accepted the fact you're going to be hungry. You're now hungry. So you can't use cravings as an excuse because you've said that you're okay with being hungry. So in theory, it puts you ahead. Yes, you have some water buildup and all that sort of stuff leading to your menses, but we know that by the end of week 1, in the start of week 2, when the water's washed off, usually your weight is probably at its lowest around there. So if you've taken advantage of that 2-week sort of progesterone spike and metabolism spike, in week 2 of, give or take week 2 of each menstrual cycle that you have, you should see that weight fall off in a deficit, or body fat fall off, depending on the marker that you're using. That's how I sort of run it with my girls.
And this is why I will always say protein and veggies are probably the biggest thing that you can do for yourself if you are experiencing this. Like, it's not rocket science. Eat more protein, eat more veggies. Protein helps with cravings and it's also satisfying. Same with veggies. Like, it is, I do see it a lot where it says like you don't have to suffer through diets, but it's like, yeah, you don't have to suffer as much, but you're still going to have to suffer through it. Like, it's not an easy process and you will be hungry. But what are, I guess, aside from magnesium, you can touch on omega-3 and whatever else you say, but what are some amazing, I would just keep saying magnesium because we really honestly take enough of it, especially for females.
Yeah, the biggest one is magnesium for females. Honestly, you could cover a pretty broad range of stuff with a really, really good multivitamin. When I say a good multivitamin, this is where the caveat is. Not something that you buy from like My Chemist Warehouse and most of the shops in Australia. There might be one or two that I haven't come across them, but you might get lucky. But I heard Piping Rock, they seem to be the better ones because you can get access to like the States, the American brands and stuff, and they just dosed way better with much better supplements. So you'd cover most of your bases with a good multivitamin. It doesn't have to be a female specific multivitamin, just a multivitamin. It's like female specific protein, it does the same thing. And getting magnesium. They'd be the best two, I would say. And then for most people, like vitamin D, just because we don't get enough vitamin D because we live, like in Australia. You can use fish oils. A pretty good potent fish oil will definitely help. It helps with a lot more. It helps with other things. It does help. It's been shown to help with a little bit of cramping every now and then. When it comes to menstrual cycle, it comes to menses, it comes to cramping, the biggest thing with pain is you'll hear a lot of the time that you're not meant to be in tremendous amounts of pain from like specialists and stuff like that. It's interesting in that, in theory, the difference is when a lot of the studies were done on pain or have been done on pain, the actual nutritional interventions that we use were very different to now. Like we have a lot more processed foods and that sort of stuff here. We have a lot more access to different types of foods than we did then, as well as activity, and just lifestyle changes are very different. So we can limit bouts of pain. Interesting ways to do it are actually literally a bit of dairy, a little bit more phytoestrogens and stuff like that they seem to help.
Broccoli,
but
by the way.
It's like it just seems to help. It's just one of those things. Again, everyone's different, so we won't know. It may work for you, but it may not work for your friend. We don't know.
Thank you for mentioning that, actually, because he mentioned pain, guys. Pain. Like, I'm actually getting really sick of seeing it as well. Like, there's so much shit out there, but if you look at someone's profile, this is why I say you need to know exactly who you're getting your information from. And I am so blessed. Thank you, Luke. I'm so blessed to have gone through the mentoring that I went through, because it has taught me to analyze, but I don't know whether to also attribute that to going to uni, because uni has helped me disseminate a lot of shit and gave me access to papers. But the thing is, pain isn't just a physical thing. It is a very, very mental thing. And it may not be, if there are people out there saying it may not be normal, it might be common, but not normal. It's like, but that's different. What's your perception of pain? Because I know someone who broke their thumb and it's all healed up, but they can't even use their thumb because to them it's still in freaking pain. But physically, there is literally nothing wrong with it. There is no sign of anything wrong with this, but there is still that phantom pain there from what existed. So that is something to keep in mind as well. And I guess two other things I want to mention to chuck onto the PMS thing is there are studies that melatonin is actually really beneficial for people that they're like, I take melatonin regardless. It's so amazing. It's an antioxidant. But if you suffer from premenstrual dysphoria, it is beneficial. That's what I use omega-3 for as well. Like if you are PMDD, take your omega-3 so it can like do this.
I mean, you pretty much touched on it. It's literally there to assist with those symptoms or potential symptoms. So PMDD is an interesting one. It doesn't seem to, it's really funny because I know a lot of females don't realize they have it. And it's kind of like they're having all these weird symptoms, both, physical and mental. And it's kind of like, shit, like what's going on here? And then you start bridging into this phenomena almost like, hey, this could be what it is. We don't know much about it. Like there's some research on it and there's some, experts talking about it, but it's not really spoken about. And they're kind of like, oh yeah. But then it's like on the flip side, I try not to I try not to mention it overly much because like most people being human, right? When you look at, for example, like a horoscope and it gives you these details and you're like, yeah, that's me. You're like, no, that's everyone. Like everyone can fit into this little crappy, stupid thing. So it's the same thing. So I try not to break into it too much. I'd rather just sort of leave it. But there are those cases or causes that happen sometimes. And it helps the client mentally understand and accept where they're at.
if you're a client and you're listening to this, I'm really sorry, but this is why I really struggle sometimes to tell you why things are the way they are. Like, I'm just like, just do it and tell me how you feel. Because I actually have 2 clients that I know have PMDD, but I have not mentioned a thing to them because I know placebo. And that's why I don't like talking about menstrual cycle things. I try not to talk about things that you can start imagining. Like, I find it hard because it's like, I want you to know why I'm saying what I'm saying, but at the same time, I don't, because I don't want you to expect it. And everyone also responds differently. So in a way, it's just like, you tell me how you feel, and then I can explain to you why, and then go that way.
Well,
so it's not like
the thing is with the menstrual cycle as well, and the way I like to sort of put it, I like to give general information where, you know, it's probably going to suit everybody, and everyone's going to be like, oh yeah, right. But then you have your own individual cycle, and it's funny because that's yours. Like, no one else has your cycle. That's like, own it. Like, that shit's yours. Like, be proud of it. You know what I mean? Like, that, if you have it and it's running and it's healthy, like, shit, fucking, hey, yes, you've done very, very well. Be proud of that shit, because there's only a handful of females I've come across in the 6-7 years of coaching that actually have a regular, healthy, what we deem a regular, healthy menstrual cycle. So it's like, own that shit. You know what I mean? Like, that's yours. Like, I can give you all the information in the world, but it's not going to apply to you specifically because you aren't the next person.
that's why I really want to say, stop looking for information for things that are particular to you. Like, there is general information out there, and that's why I put out podcasts, that's why I put out posts, and that's why I help my clients individually. That's why Aaron helps his clients individually, because we have individual needs and we respond differently. But we're closing on time, so I want to quickly just touch on that.
Yeah, that's okay. That's all right.
But it's so important that you realize the more you try to find information, the more you are going to not only confuse yourself, but you're going to put false things into your head. Like, I remember I used to do it to myself all the time, and I know everyone, like, anyone can relate to having some type of placebo effect. But I wanted to also close this off coming on to hormonal birth control, because I know more people than not have been on it. Now, over the days of people actually seeing the research on it, they're coming off it. I love how Luke says this. By the way, Luke's my coach / mentor / person of awesomeness. But he said it this way: I can't believe they won't give males hormonal replacement, or they won't give females hormonal replacement when they're in menopause, but they would happily just prescribe a birth pill. Like, it's,
which is hormonal replacement. So this is an interesting one when it comes to birth control. We've had over the years different types of birth control. So depending on your age, will depend on which one that you've probably had, right? We've got 3 to 4 classes of birth control, and they all act a little bit differently. We have, again, to really simplify this, we have a progesterone-based one and an estrogen-based one, and then we have a mixed one, right? They're the tablets that effectively you take. That's where the 28-day cycle sort of started. It was more of a marketing thing to say, hey, look, we can charge you every month. Like, it makes it much easier to regulate versus every 35 days, for example. But we have estrogen-based or estrogen-dominant birth control, which isn't a thing really anymore. It's still around, but doesn't really get used. Taking exogenous estrogen while you have estrogen production puts you in what? Estrogen dominance, gives you a bit of problems. So they were seeing that there were some potential issues with having more estrogen than having progesterone, because we always have to find that ratio or that balance. We then had the progesterone, they're called progestins, but progesterone-based birth control. And again, same thing, it threw the actual ratios out of whack. Now we have more progesterone than estrogen, which was a problem. So they thought, stuff it, let's mix them together and we'll try and get the balance right, which they did. Problem being that now you have both elevated estrogen and progesterone. So it's almost like you're superhuman without the superhuman effects. How that relates to training, because you're using synthetic estrogen and progesterone, but more so the estrogen for training side of things, the synthetic estrogen effects didn't allow for the natural balance of other factors like testosterone to occur. So again, females do have a little bit of testosterone. It's not much. It's like 2 to 3 milligrams per week on average, give or take, which isn't much at all. But that 2 to 3 milligrams makes a big difference when it comes to training and training output and recovery. So increasing both estrogen and progesterone went up, but testosterone didn't come up with it. So we had a bit of a level issue here where females were then coming off the pill, and then their training got way better. They got way stronger, they got way leaner, and they felt 10 times better. And it's like, well, yeah, because now the ratio of hormones is back into a more functional amount, effectively.
But you also need to realize, guys, that there is a lag time here as well, and you will feel like shit before
Yes.
you feel fit again. Like there,
Yes.
you just influx. You just had an influx of artificial hormones in your body. And this is even more important. I'm going to say again and again, eat your fucking veggies, because like it has all the minerals you need. And if you've been listening to this long enough and you follow me or you follow Aaron on our social media platforms, I'm sure we both talk over and over about the importance of adequate nutrients. Like I always push a particular way of having a good look on a multivitamin, and it's you need to have methylated B vitamins in there because our bodies don't always absorb them. And the one that I always push out is Life Extension's 2-a-day multivitamin, because Thorne's too expensive, but that's another option as well. Like make sure that you are getting in adequate nutrients. And this is why it's not all about if it fits your macros, because what you eat determines how your body responds. And listening back to this whole conversation, you might want to play it again. It explains why. So I guess with that, I'm going to let you like sum it up, put your little points out there about, I guess, like 5 different topics we spoke about, and tied up with a bow.
I think honestly, the best way I can sum it up, you again, more so to the female listeners, you are an individual. You have your own internal and external stresses that happen, right? And the best way for you to manage them is the best way for you to manage them, and that's on you. And the strategies you can put in place with a coach or with a mental health expert, depending on obviously the issues at play. When it comes to physiology, it's nothing but time, and that's probably the biggest, hardest thing to hear is that it's time. If you're in a deficit and you've had issues, at maintenance will probably recorrect it. And on the plus side, on the other side, being in a surplus for a period of time and you want to recorrect all the issues that you've accumulated from being in a surplus, time at maintenance is probably going to be the best thing for you. Time is going to basically heal all wounds is probably the best way I can put it for that. When it comes to your hormones and all that sort of stuff, again, not that we touched on it, but it's like hormone recorrection does happen in a deficit for a period of time, depending on the hormone. But again, we can always do another one if you really want to and really deep dive into hormones. But yes, yeah, it's just that we'd be here for we'd be here for ages. That's all. But we do see like thyroid and leptin, ghrelin, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone all better regulate for a short period of time inside a deficit. And you don't get the maladaptations of the deficit usually, depending on the length of time. So things like that can occur, but at the same time for the girls, it's kind of like just, hey, if you have a healthier menstrual cycle, if you feel good and want to train, don't worry about it. Don't worry about your menses. You don't need to train hard and weak, or train hard and weak. Train harder or train with less intensity at certain periods of your menstrual cycle. It's not a big deal. Just train. Deload when you need to deload. When your coach tells you, eat the foods that you want to eat. Make sure that you're getting enough healthy food in, and you'll get there. It's just time.
Like honestly,
it's time.
if you don't put in the time, then you're going to get stuck with the same results because you just keep wanting the quick fix. I guess
it'd be kind of nice if there was a pill, but then we wouldn't have a job.
Yeah, pretty much. And it, like, you can even relate it to the whole shit cabangle that's going on around us, with the fact that we're still getting prescribed band-aids instead of actually getting to the root cause. And like, you can do that all you want, but the root cause of being unhealthy and unfit is still there. So with that, we might have to do a hormones podcast too, because
we can do that.
I'm in love with endocrinology, but
yeah, we can do that. That'd be fun.
We will. So with that, I'm going to put Aaron's Insta link below at Elite Strength Coach on Instagram. he's kind of beasting out the hack squats lately, which is freaking awesome. But
Yeah, I had a really bad session last week, but anyway, that's okay. We won't talk about that.
yeah, you will get bad sessions. That's okay. So with that, I thank you for coming on. That was a blast.
No worries.
And I hope
Thank you for having me on.
I hope a lot of you girls got a lot out of this. And I will see you on the next podcast. Thank you.
Done and done. Thank you very much.